Right, so let's get into that discussion on really the state of policing in South Africa. We're asking, are we losing the fight against crime? The country has recently witnessed protests by angry communities who expressed much ire about how police are dealing with certain cases, including the rape of the 7-year-old Cwecwe and another minor in Mpumalanga. This is, of course, as the president, during the 2025 Policing Summit, asked for a coordinated and community-driven approach to crime fighting. But what is that supposed to look like? Well, we get some perspective now. We're joined by former Western Cape Police Commissioner, Dr. Leonard Max, joining us. We're also joined by criminologist, Professor Nomalo Gopal, back with us. And again, back on the show is the South African Policing Union's spokesperson, Mr. Lesiba Tobakhaile. Guys, thank you so much for joining us. We're taking your calls as well on this one. The number to call, 01059460010. What do you want to see being done that improves policing in our community? Or send us a WhatsApp on 072-110-5584. I think I want to do this with our guests, and just as we start, really begin the conversation with a litmus test on the confidence levels that we have in our policing. And Dr. Max, I'll let you go first here. If I ask you the question, is our SAPS, in your view, how you'd characterize it, winning the fight against crime? Or how do you characterize that?
Thank you for the opportunity. In my view, respective view, no, the police are not winning the fight against crime. Crime is increasing, and it is a very serious problem currently in South Africa. That, the trust, as a result of the fact that the police inability to safeguard the citizens of this country, the trust in the police was at a very low level in 2021, according to the Human Research Council, at a level of 27%. And during 22 and 23, it was at the level of 22%. And that speaks for itself. That is very low. And it is for that particular reason, when the police are killing suspects in KwaZulu-Natal and elsewhere in the country, that the community actually applaud the police for those killings, because they are sick and tired for crime. But on the other hand, we must also understand that the police are the primary entry point to the criminal justice system. They are in the face of the communities. And once a case has been postponed or a person got bail at court, the blame is being imposed on the police, because the prosecutors and the magistrates are not there. The police are there, and simultaneously they are being labeled as corrupt as well.
Yeah. Interesting. And so let's bring in Professor Gopal on this one. You know, one of the things as well that we're discussing, and there's so many themes to this, and we'll certainly get into them. But Professor Gopal, a big discussion over the past few days around new legislation that's been introduced by the police minister, the drafting of the proposed amendments to the Private Security Industry Regulation Act, essentially looking at the role of private security in assisting police. We'll get Professor Gopal up in a moment, but perhaps Tobakhaile, you can assist us with this as well. The sort of legislation that we see coming into effect at a time like this to I suppose, manage what private security does, even when we know that the stats last year said private security companies outnumbered SAPS officials 4-1. So when I ask you that question of that comparison between private security and certainly the SAPS, do you say in that litmus test that we are winning the fight against crime?
Thank you for having us, lady, and also greetings to my fellow panel members and also to the viewers. From our perspective, clearly it is true that security companies, they really outnumber the number of police officers in this country. And looking at the constitutional mandate that the police are really carrying, and the fight against crime, it is still not yet won. we are still troubled, as we have seen during the last quarter, the previous quarter, when the Minister of Police released those crime statistics. It really showed us that the crime has decreased, but we have not reached where we are supposed to be. And the role of private security, it's quite important, because we know that in most cases, most people, or even companies and businesses, they prefer to really use private security, and even in their homes. And even some communities, gated communities, they would have security companies that are playing a critical role to really assist in terms of fighting crime. And they are also playing a critical role and also bolstering the police, because the police cannot be everywhere, cannot have eyes everywhere, cannot have ears everywhere. Then the role that is being played by security companies should be taken seriously, and it should not be downplayed from our perspective, because they are really playing a critical role. As long as we still have lower numbers of police officers with a population that is ever growing. I mean, if you look at the current ratio that is being used for the police officers, and also when you look at the current population, that really tells you that the population of South Africa really surpasses the numbers of the police. And even when it comes to being it the United Nations ratio that is recommended of one police officer being responsible for around 210 citizens, but also going further into the one that is being used in SAPS, it is even way higher. So the role of private security, we deem it as quite important in assisting the police, because to fight crime, you need collaboration. The police alone cannot be able to do it. And any form of legislation that comes out, it should be to strengthen the functioning and the collaboration between the police and also the private security and any other law enforcement agencies in this regard.
But is this what the legislation, so I'm going to stay with you a little bit, Mr. Tobakale, because you've made an interesting point where you say any legislation that comes out needs to support what the private security company is doing in aid of the SAPS. But this is what we're seeing coming out of these amendments. For instance, you're seeing that the proposal is to not allow private security companies the use of high caliber firearms. And then the issue of handcuffs and tasers and allowing them to be able to make use of that also coming into question on whether or not private security companies will be allowed to do this. So are we legislating in the right way, as you say that we should?
In this regard, remember those who carry high caliber firearms. I mean, you go, you see police officers patrolling on the road carrying high caliber firearms like your R5 and, any other higher firepower because they are allowed to do so. But in terms of the experience that we have seen, I mean, reflecting on what one of the traditional leaders had said from the summit yesterday, he really expressed in terms of the high caliber firearms that are carried by private security. But I think we need to look at to say, what impact does it have? What is an impact that when a criminal sees a police officer carrying a high caliber firearm, when a criminal sees a security officer carrying a high caliber firearm, and even the criminals themselves, they happen to be armed to the T when they go to do criminal activities. So from our view, as the South African Policing Union, is that all efforts, even more especially when it comes to legislating the type of firepower that is being utilized by private security, we don't think that it is indeed about to say, is it only high caliber firearms? But we should look at it being utilized appropriately for the purpose. Because when criminals come, they don't ask questions. They take advantage. And if they come with high power carrying AK-47s and carrying any type of firearm that could do damage, that could indeed intimidate people, that could go and really make them achieve what they want to achieve, they would utilize that without even hesitating. But if we could start to try and want to really find ourselves having to legislate certain things, I think what should be legislated, it is the use thereof, to say, how do you carry something, those type of firearms, not intimidating the members of the community to say, where can it be carried in regards to when it comes to private security, but to really say that they should not carry it. It means in one way or another, it could give even more power to criminals, because then they would know that they are now they are now barred to use to carry those higher caliber firearms. They come with them, illegal ones, to come and really attack the society, and that should not be allowed.
And we need to get
May,
into
may
the
I
debate.
add
Sure,
to
go
that
ahead. Go
statement,
ahead,
please?
Dr. Max. Yes, please.
Yes. I just want to add to say, with the commission of crime, there's three elements involved. And that is the desire to commit a crime, the ability to commit a crime, and the opportunity. Now, the police can't be all over the show to prevent at all times the commission of a crime. And it's that for the public as well as private security.
Yeah.
Now, just to illustrate the growth of private security, in 2014, private security had 487 and 58,000 private security in service. In 2024, 608,977, an increase of 25%. And you must understand that private security, to a great extent, took over the crime prevention function of the police service. The police are totally under-resourced. They stand on, I think, 175 to 180,000 for all these years, while the community are increasing. They are overwhelmed with complaints. Police stations don't have any more crime prevention units. The vans available run to complaints, and they've got a book where they register the complaints and attend from one complaint to another. There's no time for crime prevention. And that is where private security steps in. Private security is actually the most active partner for the police and a force multiplier for the police to curb crime. If you look at on a daily basis, you can see how private security assists the police with armed robberies, cash and transit robberies, etc. The police should actually recruit reservists from private security, because those people are already firearm competent.
Right.
And once they go through the phases of the reservist curriculum, they can be employed actively and they can place themselves on duty as a police officer at a crime scene.
Yeah.
But these rules and regulations emasculate private security.
Just a second. Yeah, I want to give it to you, Prof. Gopal, and I want to come to you. Sorry, your line has been giving us some trouble, but let's give you an opportunity. And let me lead the thought in as well. You hear Dr. Max talking about the capacity issues and why you've got private security stepping into the gaps. Is this why, for instance, today we're seeing the KZN Premier Tamin Duli maintaining that the Provincial Commissioner Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi has the support of the public, this approach of fighting fire with fire? It's a capacity issue, Prof?
So, Naledi, I don't necessarily think it's a capacity issue, but I want to quickly piggyback on what Dr. Max had just submitted.
Sure.
And I think what's important for us to understand and take cognizance of is the fact that private security has become about a multi-billionaire industry in South Africa. So I think there's a great deal of complexities around that in terms of how we promote private security, whilst at the same time it's actually become mercenary, I think, in a couple of ways. But in terms of when we look at the issue of how we respond to crime in South Africa, my personal view is that, and of course it's based on scientific evidence as well, is that we cannot in any way fight fire with fire. Absolutely not. And whilst I hear the police, people, both the SAPU as well as the previous ex-commissioner talk about how policing should actually be done, etc., I think the whole notion of violence is what perpetuates violence in our country. So for me, that is an area of no-go, because really speaking, both our police as well as private security, their main function should be to provide a safer environment for all of us who reside in this country. And when I hear this kind of speak, I get very concerned indeed, because again, I'm going to reiterate, it actually fuels and entrenches the whole notion of violence.
the question then becomes, Prof, what is the alternative? And that is such a critical question, and we're going to answer that and a lot more as we look at the state of our policing in South Africa. Taking your calls on 010-594-6010. Some initiatives that have been announced that are taking place, for instance, the digitizing of the processing of dockets. That's for the SAPS, as they say, to be able to not lose dockets or have dockets stolen. Will it work? All that and more on the other side of this. Stay with us. Welcome back. We continue with our conversation as we look at the state of policing in our country, taking your calls on 010-594-6010. When the president asks for a bold, coordinated and community-driven approach to crime fighting, what does that mean for yourself and for your own community? Is there a sense that you are able to step in, even at a time when we've seen so much activism in various parts of the country, with people taking to the streets to protest against crime, certainly in the issue of the hashtag justice for Cwecwe. But to send us a WhatsApp on 072-110-5584. Professor Gopal, before the break there we had a chat about fighting fire with fire not being the approach, with the support that many will say, perhaps a Commissioner Mkhwanazi is getting in KZN, the support that he's getting. What do you say is the alternative when people say, well, he's getting us somewhere? And I think that's an important one. We'll get to the digitizing in a moment. Yeah.
Sonality, I think what has happened is that we've reached a stage in terms of the crime situation in South Africa where citizens are really quite, should I say, to say it very colloquially, quite fed up. So whatever kind of solution is available to them, be it legitimate or illegitimate, they are quite happy to agree with that. But I think if we had to reverse the process and go back, for example, even 15 years, and if we were using that kind of approach where crime was probably lower than what it is now, in all probability, we might have had a different response. So I think, again, like I want to reiterate the fact that it's what citizens are seeing as their only hope, and that's a default position. Fighting fire with fire should not be our hope. Our hope should be to reduce crime in the country using the legitimate means that we have, using the institutions that we have whose purpose is to keep us safe and secure. So in terms of the larger discourse on crime fighting initiatives or the levels of crime in South Africa, definitely not fire with fire.
Can I add to that?
Sure, go ahead, Dr. Max.
Yes, I totally agree with Prof. Address fire with fire is not a solution. However, the police got a constitutional responsibility in this country in terms of Section 2053 of the Constitution, which states very clearly the police are there to safeguard the inhabitants of this country as well as to enforce the law. Now, that gives them the right to use force. But that force is not unlimited. That force has been regulated by Section 49(2) of the Criminal Procedure Act, which needs to be necessary, reasonable, and proportionate. Now, once we look at certain politicians' utterances in the past, where they say if you join the war, and ask questions afterwards, that is totally irresponsible. The constable, at the cold face, they believe that they've got the minister's support in that regard, and they actually then act with fire. It is the responsibility of the police as well as accountability of anyone who actually use lethal force to account for their actions. And it is for that reason that IPIT has been established. So I totally agree, but the police cannot be killed because they fear to defend themselves as well as citizens of this country. But, of course, within the confines of the law.
And there's, of course, the commentary that says to police, don't die with your gun in your hands. And in fact, Sapu will help us in a moment to talk to us about, just how safe police feel as they try to keep our communities safe. But taking your WhatsApps on 072-110-5584. I tend to fly through that number, 072-110-5584. Let's look at just a handful of those WhatsApps that have come in this evening. Sanjay Lachman of the FBI Foundation says, Everyone's eyes are open to see that crime is rising every day. The only person who can't see it is the president. Pointless talking all the time about the same thing when there's no implementation in place. Most crimes are through the SAPS. Sanjay, we appreciate your input. Thank you so much. Anonymous says, the first thing to do is the Minister of Police must be trained and an experienced officer, not a politician. Another anonymous says, good evening, Naledi. A lot of our police forget that they work in an institution that is there to serve, the SAPS, of course. This is now a symptom of the cancer that is corruption. From the debacle of Ria Pierre, Begitele and Jackie Slebi, SAPS has been a revolving door of inept cadres who were not there to serve South Africa. This is the current DNA in the service. You can't plant potatoes and expect to harvest grapes. Great choice of words there, Anonymous. Thank you so much for that. So I think that's, and I see you laughing, Dr. Gopal, is the idea of not planting potatoes and expecting, raspberries. I can't even remember what the particular veggies were. But let's talk about IPID and whether or not IPID is doing the work that's necessary. I immediately think about the shooting that we saw in KZN, Lisiba, where 4 families then came out and said that they defended their sons who were shot at and killed by police, saying that there simply has not been a thorough investigation into what exactly took place there. Is IPID doing the job of, I suppose, clearing the smoke as to what happens when we see incidents like that of fire being used to fight fire, particularly in cases that we see coming out of areas like KZN?
Yeah, I think maybe let's start with what you said, what you asked before, Naledi, that the police are feeling safe. Unfortunately, they are not feeling safe when we are looking at the high number of police killings in this country. Every quarter, when the minister is releasing crime statistics, there are numbers of police officers being killed. It's not going down, it keeps going up. So that really tells you that criminals are out there to kill police officers. Because why? Police officers are standing at the door for blocking them to do criminality. So it remains to be our position that police officers carrying their constitutional mandate, they must not lose their lives whilst they are armed to the teeth. They need to defend themselves and they need to defend the citizens of this country. And further to that, IPID has been given a mandate clearly for them to investigate all the cases that are relating, in terms of the police action. And in this regard, we don't have any doubt in terms of what IPID's responsibility is and what they are doing. The challenge that is there, it is just in terms of capacity, because they also have challenges relating to capacity, which clearly makes the cases that they are investigating sometimes to take long for them to really have an outcome in terms of how did that case really come out. But even us as an organization, we are carrying a responsibility each time when we speak to our members to say in each and every case they have to make sure that when they act within the parameters of the law. I mean, everyone has went to college and they have, they understand in terms of the use of force, as it was also, earlier, I think Dr. Max spoke about it in terms of the provisions of Section 49 to say the use of force, when is it becoming applicable? And where there happen to be issues about complaints, whether the police action was correct or incorrect, unfortunately, none of us, is eligible to really make that determination except IPID, whom, we just stated out some of the challenges that they are faced with. Yeah. We think that if the issue of capacity can be dealt with there, then those outcomes would be able to come out. But in terms of them doing what they're supposed to do to investigate police action, we don't have any issue with it, because that is what they are carrying in terms of their mandate.
Yeah, thanks, Lisiba. All right, let's take calls. Linda's calling in from Soweto. Just a second, Prof. Let's hear from our callers. Linda's in Soweto. Linda, good evening. Thanks for calling in.
Good evening, ma'am. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you so much for calling. Talk to us.
I'm good, ma'am. I'm just listening to your topic, and I'm like, how do you fight crime with so much unemployment rate in the country? These people who are committing this crime are people who are unemployed. So how do you fight crime? Create jobs. Then the fight against crime will decrease. Just create jobs for these young people who are unemployed. Then the crime will decrease. The poor are still going to take from the rich if this unemployment rate increases. That's all. We can give solutions, we can do what? How many squatter camps are built now? So many squatter camps around South Africa, but there's not even one police station that is built around those squatter camps. So do you expect that crime will decrease? No.
Okay.
No, guys.
Yeah.
Let's be realistic.
Yeah,
Let's
Linda.
fight unemployment. Crime will decrease. Thank you.
Linda makes a strong point. There's the saying, idle hands are the devil's playground, and rings so true for many communities that see that desperation in young people in their own areas. Prof, you wanted to step in there, and as you continue the thought that you wanted to take on, I'm really keen to hear what you think about this process that the SAPS says they're going to be embarking on, of the digitizing of processing dockets to deal with corruption. There was that text earlier speaking about, well, we do have corruption in the system, and that needs to be dealt with. But is digitizing going to be the answer? The Prof, go.
So yeah, Naledi, I think, yeah. So of course, we are in the digital era. We can't run away from that. And if we want to have effective policing and reduce the amount of corruption that currently exists, I think digitizing is the way to go. However, with a particular rider, and that is, do we have the capacity, do we have the skills residing within our police service personnel to actually embark on technologizing the way in which we police? If we had, it's important that we have a candid conversation around this. And currently, we know that even our handwritten statements are often, usually is one of the prime reasons why our prosecution rates, our sentencing is so low, because of the fact that.
I'm listening to you, Prof. Okay, that line is frozen, unfortunately. Dr. Max, do you want to jump in there quickly? And do we digitize? Will it work to deal with corruption in the system?
Let me tell you, technology is undeniable, going to assist the police to curb corruption. If you take, for instance, your body-worn cameras has been proven worldwide that it decreases corruption, it decreases the use of excessive force, it decreases the internal steps and so forth, and increases public trust as well. So let me also say, these killings, I think one of the reasons why the minister and CIRA actually embark on this new amendments, I think that is an effort to curb, shootings, use of firearms. But I think the approach is wrong, because I didn't see so far any statistics indicating that private security is the black sheep and causing criminals to be in possession of firearms. Is rather the South African Police Service per se, because 400, according to the minister's answer to Parliament, is that between October to March 2024, 400 firearms as well as 29,128,000 ammunition were lost by the South African police. And where are they? They are in the hands of the criminals. Now, coming back to the shootings, and that is, there's a concept they call coded ammunition, which needs to be investigated. When you buy your ammunition, that ammunition is being registered against your name. And I can't actually supply, if I'm a gang leader, I can't with a license, can't supply my runners or my fellow gang leaders or members with ammunition, as it's currently the case. And if the gangsters know that you've got a license for a firearm, they will come to you and threaten you and say, you have to buy for us ammunition, otherwise your family is in danger. Yeah. So it will keep that. So there's a lot of, I must say, the city of Cape Town is the leading state institution in using technology and crime fighting.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna get some recommendations on
But
how we
can I
improve it.
jump
Just
in
a
there,
second,
please,
Prof. I need to
Naledi?
take a short break. When we come back, we'll get some recommendations on what needs to be done, because there has to be a way forward. A call to action has been made by the president. What do we do with that? I will close it off on the other side of the stay with us. Welcome back. Are we losing the fight against crime in South Africa? We continue our discussion. We're taking your WhatsApps on 072-110-5584 and calls on 010-594-6010. Let's take a look at 3 WhatsApps. Tsepo Peter Molapisi says, the police alone cannot solve the crime problem in South Africa. It requires a holistic approach involving government, civil society and local communities all working together towards a safer and more equitable society. Thank you so much for that, Tsepo. What is that role of communities? That's a really critical point there. Hi, Naledi. No, we cannot get rid of crime, because the biggest problem in South Africa is that the useless police are the real criminals. I have first-hand knowledge of crooked police. The other main issue is overweight police officers. Where is the training? The criminals outrun the overweight police. With a few laughing emojis there. Thank you so much for that. Antis in Soweto says, hi, Naledi. I attended a report of murder in Protea Glen, where we were told as the community that Protea Glen has 1 patrol van. That's a big area. We have extensions from 1 to 45. Honestly, it means we can't rely on them. Security companies do indeed help. Andres, thank you so much for sending that WhatsApp. One of the texts there, Prof. Gopal, saying, yes, community engagement is necessary. What does that even look like? Your recommendations as we close this off, Prof. Gopal.
I think in terms of community recommendations, bringing the community on board, which was part of the initial mandate of SAPS when we revolutionized, or when we transformed from the force to the service. But I think, Naledi, if we take one step back, it is how do we empower our citizens? And that's the first point. Empower citizens to start owning the democracy, empower citizens to start participating in the democracy. And I think when we look at policing and safety and security issues, that's where we should really start, in addition to the fact that we need to have the Ministry of Police listen to what the issues are on the ground and start to resolve those in terms of resources, etc. Have a hearing have a listening to what community members are saying. They are a rich source of data.
Yeah, really important. Daniel is calling in from Valcom. Daniel, good evening. Thanks for calling in.
Hello, how are you, ma'am?
I'm well, sir. Talk to us. What are your thoughts?
Yes, in South Africa, there's a lot of problems. Because my side, I'm just blaming our government, because all the border, the people who just come in South Africa and out, and they don't know what's happening. And you can't say you're controlling the criminals when you're not closing your borders. Hello?
Okay, Daniel. And that's a very clear point, straight to the point as well. Thank you so much. Daniel from Valcom there saying, well, we've got porous borders. If people are coming in and out of the country, how are we going to control crime? Just closing thoughts, Mr. Lesiba Tobakale, from the police union's point of view. What needs to be prioritized? And when we say community involvement, how do we improve that? When in Marry Me informal settlement recently, we saw a community that had organized itself to keep itself safe, and even those volunteers lost their lives.
Yeah, Naledi, collaboration is key. I mean, at the summit, there are a lot of stakeholders that are there, including traditional leaders, religious leaders, and looking at your metro police, municipal police, and everyone, including CPF. So they play quite a critical role, because SAPS on its own, they will not be able to really fight against crime. And further to that, we need to secure our borders. Border Management Authority as an entity has been established, and if it is indeed capacitated appropriately, they will be able to take care of the borderline, and they police the borderline, they police the border gate, and then the SAPS members would be able to concentrate in the country in order to deal with high levels of crime. But we need to deal with the morale of the police. They're very same people who are responsible for taking care of us as the citizens in this country. I mean, there are issues that relate to their conditions of service, being it promotions and anything that has to do with their benefits. You need to have happy workers whom, when they they go out there knowing that, you know what, they are giving their lives out there to serve their communities, faced with these dangers, they need to be taken care of. But moreover, even in the summit, we should not, it should not just be just a talk show. We need to have time frames that are clearly attached to whatever outcomes that we will come out with, and also look at the implementation, monitor the implementation. Because if we don't do that, then it will just be taking us back, whereas the criminals are really, running a racket in the country and continue to see high levels of crime persisting in our country. That is not what we want. We need a solution. We believe those recommendations, they would assist us moving forward.
Yeah. They say retrospect. Yeah, we're going to give you the opportunity, Dr. Max, to give us your closing thoughts. I wanted to say that they say retrospect is in 2020, the saying is. So as a former Western Cape Police Commissioner, what do you think needs to be prioritized as we close off, especially when we say include community?
Yes, I really hope that this summit is going to result in very tangible, proposals which can be implemented. Our problem in South Africa is that we have meetings on meetings and plans on plans, but the execution thereof, that is the problem. Now, I must say, the minister already embarked on cooperation between provinces as well as between the national provinces as well as municipalities with a memorandum of understanding. That is a step in the right direction. And I also want to say that the police can only oppress a situation, but the normalization of a situation lies within particular communities. Now, all what we are saying is that all proposals which and what we are talking about sounds very romantic, but the implementation is problematic. And that is why people are mentioning here, and that is a generic problem, that the lack of resources. And that is where it is at station level. The community cannot be assisted. I mean, the evening when the 4 patrollers were shot dead, there were no police nearby, in that vicinity, to protect them. They are out there. They think they do something good for their communities, but they risk their lives as well. So, yes, I hope that the summit will bring about very good solutions or proposals which can be implemented to save our communities.
Yeah. Really great inputs from our panel this evening, and thank you so much for that. Some of those being, of course, capacitate the facilities of police stations in our communities. And of course, Professor Gopal, they're also talking about the need for us to empower communities as well. Talk to us about the highlights that you take from our discussion. We also did have Mr. Lesiba Tobakale, the South African Policing Union spokesperson, with very insightful input there. Professor Nirmala Gopal, Professor of UKZN's Department of Criminology and Forensic Studies, and Dr. Leonard Max, who's former Western Cape Police Commissioner. Well, you're still watching Newsfeed PM, the late edition. We've got more news on the other side of this. Stay with us.